report. And I hope I am joined also by my fellow co-facilitators, Sahir Fakir. Sahir, are you online? Maybe if colleagues at the UNFCCC Secretariat could just check to see whether everything is working for Zahir, so he'll be joining us as well. And in the meantime, I'll slowly get started then for our webinar today. Thanks so much for everyone joining us. As you can see, we're having now 3 of these webinars, and this is our first one. So you'll be our test pilots joining us today, and we're focusing now on Africa and Eastern Europe. So I guess I could say good afternoon to most of you. We are organizing these webinars as a series of regional outreach, which in the context of preparation of this first report on determination needs of developing countries related to the implementation of the Climate Convention and the Paris Agreement. And we're doing this as one of the mandates given to the Standing Committee of Finance from COP24. As you can see on our slide, this is some fellow members of the Standing Committee on Finance. So just by way of background, the SCF is one of the constituted bodies of the Convention and the Paris Agreement, and supporting the parties on climate finance matters. And as I said, the SCF received the mandate to prepare this report every 4 years, and the mandate was received by COP24 in Katowice. And here I have a coffee arriving. Thanks so much. And the report will inform COP26 and will be made available in 2020 ahead of the COP in Glasgow. So the topic for this informal regional webinar is to share, give you an update on where we are in the report so far, share perspectives, data and information on regional and country level, both as far as data availability and also data gaps, as well as the latest developments in methodological issues from both national, regional and global reports. And as I hope most of you will be aware, we have issued a call for evidence, which is available on the UNFCCC website. You can see it on your screens now, hopefully. This call for evidence is still open. I think we will come back to that also later in during the course of this webinar. And you will also find responses received to date are available on the information repository on the SCF website. Could I just check in the meantime whether we have Sahir online as well? So,
Matthias.
Yes.
Thank you. This is Martin from the Secretariat speaking. Yes, we do have Zahir online, but there is a psychological issue. His voice is not coming through at the moment. And also some background noise from your end.
From my end, oh, sorry.
And if you can also ask participants to kindly ask for muting themselves.
Yes, please. As always, a reminder, if you are not speaking, to mute your microphones, so not to have any background noise. We'll keep on reminding throughout the course of the webinar. But I'll continue then until we see we see that Sahir is also that his audio is working. And here a friendly reminder of some housekeeping matters. Use a headset if you can, and there is a possibility to raise your hand to ask the floor, and then remember to lower your hand once your question is taken. And you can also see some of the instructions as to how to use your control panel, turning off your camera when you are not speaking. Keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. And you can raise your hand as you see it those when clicking those three dots. You will find the chat button and raising your hand, and you can indicate that using that hand function on your screen. Hopefully you can see that on your screen. So I think hopefully that will work for all of us. And let me just sort of briefly also run through sort of the course of the webinar today. We've set aside 90 minutes. So first we'll just give an overview of the report and the approach taken so far. We'll invite the team writing the report to provide some insights into the work undertaken so far. And then, of course, mainly for today, we'll open the floor for discussions. We're eager to hear your views and thoughts, and look forward to active participation from all the participants in this webinar. Just to sort of give you a brief recap of the report and the work being made so far. If we go to the next slide now, or should we just? I think we've done hopefully done with the housekeeping matters. So we can move on to sort of just. I'll give you a brief outline of the work being done so far and the approach taken to the report. I mean, as I said, it was a mandate from COP24. This is the first time this kind of report will be done in the UNFCCC context. And the report then aims to map available information and data on the needs of developing country parties from a variety of sources, such as national reports being presented to the UNFCCC, as well as global and regional reports. So we're doing sort of both a bottom-up and a top-down approach. And in presenting the needs of developing country parties, the report will characterize the needs for finance, technology development and transfer, and capacity building, thematic areas and sectors across the various regions: Africa, Asia Pacific, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean. So as you see, sort of trying to approach the concept of needs from both in terms of needs for implementation, from thematic areas, mitigation, adaptation, and various sectors, be it energy, transportation, and so forth. And then, of course, from the various geographic perspectives. So the report will also highlight processes and approaches utilized for the determination of needs, underlying assumptions and methodologies, as well as challenges, gaps, and opportunities in need determination. So those are sort of basically the various chapters you will see in the report as such. So building on the initial work undertaken so far, the technical team, under hopefully some guidance from us, and with the forces of support of the Secretariat, we've done some initial work, starting with information and data gathering and the drafting of individual chapters. So I should highlight that drafting is really very much still work in progress, and further work will be completed. For example, related to terminology, to presentation, the format of the report itself. Initial information and figures that the technical team will go into more detail in the coming weeks and months. We can also provide a snapshot of the analysis to date and illustrate how data might be presented in the future. So we anticipate at the upcoming SCF meeting at the end of September, SCF members will provide more guidance on further work, including presentation of the information in the report as such.
Hello.
Is that so here?
Can you hear me, Matthias?
Yes, excellent. There you are. Did you hear my intro?
Yes, I heard. I've been connected the whole time. I'm not.
Oh, good. Good.
Not able to hear me.
But so I mean, I've basically done the introduction.
Yeah.
Do you want to pick up from there, or shall I just continue.
I can take it over if you want.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so we're dealing now with the sources of information and following the mapping of the available data and information from the national, regional and global reports, the team has been analyzing the needs from the bottom-up perspective. So they've been looking at it from a country and region perspective, thematic areas, sectors, means of implementation and time frames, and also meaning short, medium and long-term needs. For the more top-down perspective, the team has also looked at the regional and global reports, such as reports relating to multilateral development banks, the UN agencies and other institutions. In addition, all submissions received in response to the call for evidence will also be considered. With respect to the approach, given that there's a vast amount of information contained in the official national reports to the UNFCCC and the limited time to consider all this information, it is still premature to draw any findings or conclusions that can be shared today. The technical team will therefore present initial findings and trends and invite your input, particularly related to information that might inform the development of report sections on data, on the availability, gaps, methodologies, and processes, the challenges, the gaps and opportunities. I would, at this point in time, would like to introduce the team that is working on this report. For purposes of this webinar, George will be taking us through the work, but the team involves George, who's covering Africa and Eastern Europe, Sandra, who's doing Latin America and the Caribbean, and Heidi, who's doing Asia Pacific. All of these team members are on this call, should there be any questions related to that. But with that, I would like to give the floor to George. George, maybe you would want to take us through your work. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Zahir, for that quick introduction. Again, I'm George, and I'm talking to you today from Nairobi, Kenya. I would ask the person with the slides to move to the next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Secretariat, if we can just get the slide for George. Secretariat, Murray Glenn, can you guys hear us?
Hi, is it here?
Yes.
It's coming now.
Okay, super. Thanks a lot. George, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for moving to that slide. What I have to say first is most of the information that details country needs on implementing the Paris Agreement, most of this information is available from mainly government documents and documents that have been submitted to the UNFCCC. It is also partly available in government strategies and plans, and also national priorities and action plans. So what we have looked at so far is mainly major documents that were submitted to the UNFCCC. Additional information is also available from regional and global reports. We have looked at a few reports at the moment, but we intend to kind of expand the scope of the reports that we'll be looking at. And one of the things that is coming out quite clearly is that even though most of this information about needs for developing country, even though it's available, most of this information in some instances appears incomplete. For example, most of the information that we have looked at, around 2/3 of that information does not include financial information, and only around 23% of the reports that we have looked at do have details about financial requirements or some details on financial requirements, basically, to implement those things. Most of the needs, again, are usually divided into the means of implementation, with a few additions on activities on policy implementation and policy development, and also on the monitoring and reporting frameworks. So far, we have looked at more than 3,500 reports, and out of these reports, the total number of identified needs, most of these needs seem to be cutting across various countries, but we have received a lot of. We have identified around 3,500 needs from around 600 reports that we have reviewed. Again, for these reports, for the regional reports, what we have found so far is outlook reports on the energy sector, with minimal outlook reports which are regional on the other sectors. So one of the things actually that we would appreciate as an outcome of this webinar is an indication or pointing to more regional reports that look at various other sectors other than just energy. So we would appreciate that. Next slide, please. We also did look at the urgency of some of the implementation of these needs, and what is coming out is most of the long-term needs tend to be more towards the mitigation actions, and this is those needs that are projected or to be implemented within these countries in a time frame of above 5 years, and some of them are even going beyond 10 years. So most of those long-term needs tend to be in the mitigation, while the short-term needs tend to be more on the adaptation needs, mainly in the water, agriculture, and the health sectors. We are not drawing any conclusion for now, but this is mainly what we are finding out. Additionally, we are finding that very few of these needs do bring issues of gender and vulnerable communities upfront. But I think that point, I can discuss it a little bit later when you are looking at the stakeholders that are being consulted in identifying these needs. Next slide, please. Again, even though most countries have identified their needs quite clearly, the financial requirements of most of the needs that have been identified are not very well articulated. For example, the table on this slide here shows the number of reports that have been looked at, and the number of activities or the number of needs that have been identified in each of these reports. And the percentage there indicates the percentage of these activities or needs that actually do have financial information. From this table, it's very easy to draw a conclusion that for the GCF country programming, and also for TAPS, the technology assessment, the technology action plan, those are the two major kind of reports that have the highest quantified financial needs in meeting those identified activities. Most of the other reports do have less than 30% of the activities or their needs quantified in terms of financial resources required. We are finding it very interesting that the GCF country programming itself has not gone above 64%, even though there is activities that are requesting for finances. And for the TAPS, again, they are at 60%. There is a couple of reasons we are drawing from this. And I think we'll get a little bit deeper into it. But one of the things that is coming up is the methodologies for defining the TAPs are quite clear for countries and how they do this. So maybe that is one of the reasons why the financial information for the TAPs are higher compared to the others. But that is not a conclusion we have drawn yet, but it's something that you can see the data is moving us towards that direction. Next slide, please. One of the major determinants on how these needs are defined or identified is basically the process and the approaches that the countries are using. So we have looked at the various reports, and we have identified mainly the major steps in identifying these needs. And these steps vary widely across countries in terms of how the institutions that are leading this process are organized. But what we are seeing mostly is that the ministry that is in charge of environmental issues or environmental and climate change usually take the leads. In majority of the countries, is that ministry then constitutes a committee that spearheads the process of need identification. Again, most of the needs we have seen, the reports we have reviewed, there is at a very high level government ownership. So most of these needs tend to have a major commitment from government. And the figure there shows the major 4 steps that we have seen most of the countries following in identifying these needs. The process number 1 is where there is an engagement on high level people within government to ensure that there is a buy-in. These engagements in some countries, we are seeing the engagement going all the way to the presidency or the prime minister. And in some countries, it's going up to the cabinet and to the minister level. Most of the countries, around 90% of the countries are going that high. So most of these needs do have that buy-in from the government, and they have the stamp of approvals. After securing the high-level buy-in, then most countries are moving now into establishing the kind of institutional arrangement that will drive these needs identification. And this is where we're saying most of the countries, the lead ministry is usually the Ministry of Environment, and the committee that is selected to spearhead that. So that committee then decides how they get the needs from the various sectors, different levels, and these but in most countries what we are seeing is a lot of consultation is happening within governments, and sometimes there is an involvement of civil societies, and then once these sectors do contribute their needs or the consolidate those needs with the needs in a consolidated form. Is submitted to the UNFCCC. Next slide. Stakeholder consultation and national development plans, which we are calling here the top-down approach. We're calling it the top-down approach because most of the national development plans have already constituted or have been developed by the countries. And some of the countries are just taking those national development plans and drawing out some of the major projects or activities that are related to the Paris Agreement, and then identifying those as their major immediate needs. So these two approaches tend to be the most common. There is also the approach of policies, where the policies that countries have do guide how they identify the needs. This is coming out quite clearly, especially in the energy sector, where countries have renewable energy policies that is favoring, let's say, for example, mini hydropower compared to solar. Then the country will draw the needs in the mitigation sector as promotion of mini hydros rather than on solar. So policies are guiding the needs in that aspect. And here there's a map there showing some of these approaches that different countries are using around the globe. You can see the top-down approach, which is the blue color. This is where the national plans and priorities are dictating what kind of needs the countries prioritize. And then we have very few countries, not too many, mainly in Asia Pacific, that are using policies. Again, this is the national policies, and then drawing the needs based on what those policies want to drive. One of the most common one, mainly in Africa and South America, is stakeholder consultation, where the needs are drawn within those sectors. Additionally, there is a few countries that have not identified the kind of approach using to identify this. And again, not identifying the kind of approach is not a failure of the country, but I think mainly is the kind of information that is required in these submitted documents. Most of the information required there does not require countries to kind of state the approach that they used to identify these needs. So saying some of those are not identified is not a failure of the country, but it's just how the reports are formulated. Next slide, please. The stakeholder consultation, the bar graph there shows a quick summary of the reports that we have looked at the moment. And you can see majority of the countries consulting stakeholders within government. And this is government ministries or ministries representing various sectors within government. They do consolidate their needs within those sectors and do submit, and then they submit those needs to the technical or the focal point, who then consolidates these as a country's needs. Again, when we say government only, it doesn't mean that other stakeholders are not consulted, because we are hoping at least the other sectoral ministries are talking to stakeholders before they submit their needs. So we cannot draw a conclusion that it's only government that is coming up with these needs, but majority of governments, the needs are coming from the ministries. The other level of engagement, there is several countries that are doing government. They're also bringing civil societies on board, and also the private sector. That is also a majority of the countries. There is very few consideration for communities in the need identification. As you can see in the graph, very few countries at least do mention in the reports that they're involving communities in needs identification. Again, I have to be clear, this doesn't mean that governments are not involving communities, but because in these reports, participants in these discussions is not straightforward. It might also indicate that communities were involved, but they're not mentioned in the reports. And again, the same comments for the countries that have not specified the kind of stakeholders they are engaging. So that figure there does not mean there is a huge number of countries that are not specifying it. It's just not a requirement in the reports that we have reviewed so far. On the other figure there, the map, we did look at how countries are considering issues of gender. And as you can see from that figure, gender consideration is on the lower side from many countries. For this graph here, I have to say, when developing these, we looked at the reports submitted. If one report out of the several reports we are reviewing mentioned gender issues, then we'll give that country consideration as if it's considering gender issues. So when you see some countries doing gender issues, it might have been gender issues were considered in one report and not others. But this kind of brings the gravity of gender considerations in these reports. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
George, we are on the next slide, so maybe if you just continue, it might be your screen.
Okay, maybe my screen is not showing the next slide. So the next slide is talking about the methodologies. What kind of methodologies did countries employ? Because methodologies also will tell us more about the robustness of the needs identified. In developing some of the documents, this table here shows some of the documents that give guidance on what methodologies to be employed, and also which reports make suggestions of specific methodologies and approaches. And as you can see there, There are very few reports, except for the TNAs, that have very specific methodologies and approaches that are recommended in carrying out that exercise. So for this reason, there is a divergence here. Various countries are using different methodologies to identify these things, and we look at those shortly. Next slide. So from this slide is also shows how the methodologies differ between countries and from sector to sector, even within the same country. Some of the major methodologies that are currently being employed by countries include the life cycle analysis methods, the emission trajectories or projection for emissions for various sectors. There is also the MRV, the MRV systems, how those measuring, reporting, and application system can be used as methodology for identifying needs. We also have multi-criteria analysis, and this one is mainly used in technology needs assessment and also in capacity needs assessment. For costing, there is a lot of the methodology that is employed mostly is the cost estimate to identify the financial needs. And this is mostly done in the sectors of energy, transport, and also land use. Next slide, please. Most of the methods for determining adaptation needs include the multi-criteria analysis again, vulnerability assessments, where we are seeing these mostly being done by regional bodies rather than very specific countries, but still assessment is one of the ways to determine needs for adaptation, and also scenario building. Again, for these approaches, the multi-criteria analysis, vulnerability assessment, and scenario building, mostly these are bottom-up approaches that are used to determine needs in the different. At least we are seeing a difference between the methods for identifying needs for adaptation and mitigation, where the adaptation needs are more bottom-up, and for the mitigation needs are usually top-down. Next slide, please. So this is just a very quick summary of the methodologies that the countries are using. So the methods differ significantly, and mainly these might be attributed to the minimal guidance in the best methods to be employed in developing the various reports. Quantitative methodologies is mainly being used for identifying mitigation needs, and qualitative methodologies is mainly employed for determining adaptation needs. Minimal discussions on these reports on methodology is also one of the things that we're finding out. Most of these reports are not going into details on the methodologies that were used in determining these needs, except for the TNAs, where the methodologies are coming out quite strongly. And maybe because as a result of this minimal guidance, there is minimal harmonization of the methods used to determine these needs. And maybe this could be one of the drivers for the little information that is available on the financing needs from the reports we are looking at. And again, when you look at most of the financial needs, they are also varying widely in terms of cost, timeframes, and also assumptions. Next slide. So this is the slide that we really like to be one of the major outcomes of this webinar, where we would like to hear from the participants who mostly have participated in these processes of identifying needs, to share with us some insights on the challenges, gaps, and opportunities for enhancing needs determination for developing countries. And we're hoping we can look at these through the means of implementation and also partly on the MRV system. So I think I will stop there. Thank you so much, Zahir, and then back to you.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you very much for your presentation. There was also a question posed about the presentations. The presentations are available on the website, on the UNFCCC. What I want to also do at this point in time is just maybe ask some of the team members if there's anything that they want to add. And also, I was rather remiss in not introducing Athena, who's also a very important member supporting the team in this. So does any of the members want to add before I go to the floor? As before mentioned in the chat, if you want to make an intervention, please raise your hand with the raise hand function. I've recognized that Mohammed Nasser from Egypt has raised his hand, or either punch in the chat that you want to make an intervention, and we'll pick up your name from there. But before I give the floor to Mohammed, any of the team members, do you want to make any additions or make any comments at this point before I hand over, open the floor to Mohammed? I hear nothing, so Mohammed, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you so much, Zahir. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mohammed. It's a bit faint, but we can hear you.
Okay, I'm trying. I'm using the issues. I'm trying. So thank you so much. First, at the outset, thank you and the team for this very good. I think it's a very good progress than what we had last time on the webinar. It is more structured. It has a lot of information, and it is more balanced than the previous proposal. I think it's going in the right direction. It will be very informative, and I'm sure it will be at the end like a product that the SCF will be very proud of. So thank you, and thanks a lot for the team and their work and efforts. I have a couple of questions. The first one in relation to the sources. As you know, and others know, that there are some issues that are of great importance to the African group, in particular the ones that relate to adaptation. And I would say that the issues of early warning and agriculture are very important. I did skim through the document that you have shared with us. I don't know if the team has looked into the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, on the issues of in relation to early warning systems for developing countries. Also, the work that is being done under the Global Framework for Climate Services, again under WMO, which both relate to early warning and assessment of vulnerability. The second source also would be the UNCTAD. They have a lot of work on climate change and the impact on coastal transport and on landlocked countries. This is also another source that I think should be considered. So those are on the sources. I have a question on the issue of the structure of the current report, where you have chapters 3 and 4, one on methodologies and the other one on the processes and approaches. I think they should be merged together, because the processes and approaches, I would say, is a sovereign thing. So we don't want to have something that would be highlighting or putting recommendations or putting forward a specific process within countries. We don't want to venture into that. But I do understand that it is part of, it can fit under the bigger umbrella of a methodology, which is methodologies and processes that would take it forward. So in simple words, I will try to put together what I said. Again, 3 and 4 could be merged, which would make more sense. On the sources and adaptation, I think we need to include something on the early warning systems and have a little bit more information on the agriculture part in adaptation. This is for now, but thank you so much for the progress of the current structure of the report. Back to you, Zahir. Thank you.
Much, Mohammed, for that intervention. Unfortunately, I believe some of our colleagues were struggling to hear you, but I can imagine the connection is difficult. That's probably the challenge we face with when we're working with this virtual environment. George, do you want to just reflect on anything that Mohammed has said? I do also note that there are some additional slides with some probing questions, which we can also start looking at just to stimulate some of the discussion. George, do you want to have, is there any reaction to what Mohammed has said?
Maybe I would recommend Matthias to talk about the combination of the chapter 3 and 4 on the WMO reports and those kind of regional or global reports. I think that is the next step. So far, what we have looked at mainly are the specific country reports, but I think moving forward, we are going to look at those regional and global reports. And it will be very nice if you have links to some of these very interesting reports. If you can share, that would be really grateful. Stop there.
Thank you very much, George. Yeah, Mohammed, in terms of the issue of the merging of the chapters, etc., I believe that we will be having a discussion on this report in the SCF, and this will be something that we could raise in the SCF, because we've been working very much based on what the SCF is, the guidance that we've been getting from the SCF. I do note that Kamal has a hand raised as well. Kamal?
Yes, Zahir, thank you. Do you hear me? Hi, everybody. Do you hear me?
Go ahead, Kamal, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very pleased to be among you, and thank you, Matthias and Zahir, for introducing this very important report. I would like also to thank George for the excellent presentation, and as a follow-up question to what Mo already asked, I will just suggest two things. The first one will be on the slide of the overview financial needs that you presented, George. You listed a number of reporting coming from developing countries, NDCs, NAPs, and others. I think that in the countries there's also a very important tool, or what we call a national climate plan, or climate action plan, or national climate plan. Many countries have already have this kind of national planning and political climate plan, and in those national climate plans, they express their needs. Don't you think that this will be an additional source of information that may help better broadening information that is needed for this very important report? And of course, we can give examples of countries that are having their national action climate plan, and they are using it and implementing them. The second issue I wanted to also raise, you mentioned in your presentation, or during your presentation, that an issue was not required for this report. Can you please give more explanation on that? And do you think that there is issues, or there is elements that were not required, either in the outline or the term of reference, that may be needed to have a better and more efficient report on the needs report? I thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Kamal. I'll take one or two more, and then I'll give over to you, to George. I have Amar Abdul Aziz. Amar, please go ahead.
Thank you, Zahir. And thank you very much, George, for the presentation. Just a clarification issue on the presentation, which presents the analysis of the data which you found in the reports. We could see that the slide presents which reports, or whether the reports had the data or not. But we just need confirmation that this analysis will look into the numbers. So we are supposed to see numbers of the actual financial needs of the countries. This is just a clarification question. The second issue I wanted to raise is that we are doing some work on behalf of the African Development Bank to prepare a report based on the regional reports and the reports that are developed by the African Development Bank, and we're trying hard, of course, to find actual financial needs of African countries. And in this regard, also, we are planning to have some case studies. So we are planning to have some discussions with the African group of negotiators to identify some case studies that could be included in this report. And finally, it will be a submission to help the development of this report. Thank you, Zaria.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. I'll take one more, the infamous Mr. Sherman. Richard?
Thanks, Tahir, and thanks to you and Matthias and the colleagues of the Secretariat for convening this webinar. I mean, you probably know what I'm going to say right now, so maybe I should hand over to Matthias, but I'll save him on that one. So my quick question to George is, whether or not the team has done any analysis on the correlations between what are the emerging figures on the needs and how much money has been made available via the operating entities of the financial mechanism and the specialized funds. Because if this is the purpose of this entire exercise that was mandated to the SCF, was to allow the COP to do that determination and correlation between what is the actual need, and you can go and have a methodological discussion around that, but to what extent is the support that's been provided in terms of the obligations of developed countries, the legal obligations of developed countries, and its two parties in particular to provide resources. And so, I mean, and a good example would be a table on how much finances were requested or needed under the NAPA process that was done by LDCs, and then how much money was dispersed via the LDCF, and what the financial need gap is there. So I'm wondering, maybe I missed it or it's coming later on, whether or not we're going to start to see those correlations, because in fact, this is what the purpose of this report is to help the COP and the CMA do that determination of that need and to inform future replenishment processes. And I think we need to not get lost like we did for 24 years around not implementing Article 11.3D of the Convention. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. George, I'll give over to you to respond to some of those questions. Just to make a point as well, the webinar is also supposed to be focusing on the Eastern Europe side. So if there are any colleagues that have any questions around the perspectives around Eastern Europe, I know we've had a lot of questions from Africa. Please feel free to jump in. George?
Thank you for the interesting questions. The first question from Kamal. I would ask my colleague Sandra and Adi to address those, please.
Okay, hi, I'm Adi. I will respond to particularly question from Mohammed regarding the early warning and also other subsector. So we are looking into the subsectors and disaggregation of the data after this iteration. So it's on the list, and we will take notes on your important points on the early warning system. And I just want to clarify, because it's unclear, what is the second subsector you were mentioning? Is related to transport? Is this coastal transport? Just a question. And the second one, related to the question from Richard Sherman about the correlation between emerging needs and the support being provided. We are also looking into the to link between what we have done in this analysis with the biennial assessment, because biennial assessment provides that kind of information. So we are looking into that. but we haven't incorporated the analysis yet. So thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you very much. I think the question from Mohammed was around agricultural, early warning, and coastal. But Mohammed can confirm that.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
It was about the three sections. Sorry for repeating. Yes.
Did you get that, Heidi?
Yeah, clear. Thank you.
Any George or anybody else from the team?
I think Sandra was to address one of the questions on the climate action plans from various governments.
Sandra, please. Sandra, can you hear us?
I think I can try to address that quickly, and when Sandra is back,
George, can you also try and address Amar's question as well, if possible?
Okay, sure. On the question on climate action plans, the National Climate Action Plan that several governments have, most of the information contained in those documents forms part of the national communication that governments do submit to the UNFCCC. So we have indirectly kind of addressed that by looking at the national communication. But I think if time allows, then we can look at specific, maybe a couple of some countries, and see whether we are seeing anything different between the national communication and the national climate change action plan. There was also a question by Amal on the numbers. Are we going to give numbers in terms of financial needs? This is another question I'd like to ask my colleague Adi to kind of address. Adi, please.
Yeah, responding to that, we have done some analysis, but considering that not all national reports are included, so we reserve that to be discussed with also the co-facilitators. So up to this iteration, we just are ready to provide the information as tabulated in the table and in the onion diagram. So it's in the analysis in the backlog, but we haven't presented yet because it's premature right now. And I think responding to the ADB, the regional report, it would be good also to highlight, if possible, the disaggregation by sector, because there's always tendencies that energy is available in terms of information, but the other subsectors by region is very limited in terms of information. Thank you, and over to Zahir.
Thank you very much, Adi. I think Sandra has connected again. Sandra, are you back with us?
Thank you so much, Zahir. Can you confirm that you hear me?
I can hear you, Sandra.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for all the comments. I just wanted to highlight one point regarding the question that Kamal brought to the conversation about the national climate plans, which is a very important point. And one of the key elements that we noticed in the analysis of the national communications and the BURs is that most of the times all these national policies are reported in the official reports to communicate to the UNFCCC. So most of the cases, they report the advances and the creation of the future policies that they will develop. So I think with most of the cases this happens. So I think we consider that is covered, but we can always try to analyze if there is something else. I think the information that Amar is telling us about the African Development Bank analysis is very important for the analysis. And yeah, I think the next iteration we will be able to include all the more reports as the one that Mohamed was commenting. So I think it's very useful if we can receive all of these inputs for the next iteration. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sandra. And yes, it's very much a work in progress. So we value your inputs and the information that colleagues are providing us. I believe that Kamal wanted to come back. Kamal?
Yes, Zahir, if you hear me well, I would like just to react to George and even Sandra responses and the reactions to my question about the action plan, national action climate plan. The issue is funding a national action plan are medium and long-term climate plan at a national level, while national communication or BURs are reporting related to a base year, which means they report information on the climate on different issues one base year, 1990, 2000, 2005, 1994. It doesn't show what's the plan, what are the next, the future needs. I think that those two sources of information are completely different. They may be complementary in a sense, but at this stage we know that when we elaborate our national communication, first, initial, second, third, or whatever, we prepare them according to 1 year, what we call a base year for the national communication, which is the same for the national inventory, GHG inventory and so on, which means that this response cannot be the one for national climate plans. And I think this can be a very important source of information that maybe improve the quality of the needs report. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Kamal. Sandra, did you want to?
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. And Kamal, thank you so much. I think it's a very important point. I think the call for evidence is going to be a very useful tool to receive all this additional information from countries that, as you said, it's not covered by national communications and the official reports submitted to the UNFCCC. So I think this webinar itself is precisely an important moment to receive all those inputs that you consider are very important to include in this report. So thank you so much. If you all can share all this national information, it would be very useful for the next iteration.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Yes, Kamal and other colleagues, we do have this call for evidence. We are asking for people to submit information or data or anything that you may have that you think may be useful, and that can be submitted, submitting your inputs before 30th October 2020. I'm trying to see if there's Ismo. Is that Ismo asking for the floor? Ismo?
Thanks, Zahir, and thanks to the co-facilitators and everybody attending this webinar. I think it's really useful that we are organizing these regional webinars to complement the process and information. Now, I think that it's really important that we get the regional feedback, but I would like to make two comments as member of the SCF. First, I fully agree that this call for evidence is highly important because this is the first time we are conducting this needs determination process. So in order to develop the methodology and in order to visit those areas of information that are not perhaps fully reported through the traditional channels, that part I expect to be complementing the report and the findings. The other comment I would like to make is regarding the mandate of what we're doing. I think we have to be very prudent in following the mandate that we have and produce the report accordingly to what we have in the mandate. And my understanding is not that such that this report would somehow be feeding in directly to the entities, to the operational entities of the financial mechanism, replenishment processes, or what have you. That's a separate discussion. But certainly, as the work progresses at the SCF, I'm sure we're going to be visiting that discussion and other areas as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ismail. Thank you for that input. I see Mr. Sherman wants to come back again. Richard?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Tahir. So, in response to the response to my question, I mean, I think it's useful. You can of course correlate that with the manual assessment report, but the manual assessment report again will probably give us the same kind of figures where we have a problem, which is that less than 2% or even less than that is flowing through the financial mechanism of the convention. So I think going down in granular terms, you know, if you look at the GCF work programs and you see out of that an emerging figure, and that should be correlated towards what is being put into a replenishment process, because we do need to get down to that level, because that is the mandate. And I mean, I'm quite happy to let Ismo have his own interpretation of what the mandate is. The mandate is a mandate to the COP and to the CMA. The SCF is just doing a technical report. If we want to question that mandate, then we can question that mandate, because we can then reopen the Paris Agreement and we can renegotiate the convention. It is very, very clear in 11.3D and the subsequent decisions that relate to the arrangements between the COP and the operating entities, the GEF and the GCF. And in fact, we are mandated to input into those replenishment processes. So again, that is the mandate for the COP and the CMA deliberations on the SCF report. So we would like the SCF report to talk to those issues. Now, if the SCF doesn't want to do that, that's fine. I mean, we will still do this as the COP and the CMA, and this should be very, very clear. But again, I think what we need is the technical level analysis that suggests that there's a need being determined, and we can use the LDCF because that's a very instructive one, where the LDCs went off and did NAPAs. And then we can correlate that the amount of money that was requested under NAPAs, although they're outdated and the information, the need is probably much higher now, but correlate what was determined by LDCs themselves through the country processes on what their adaptation needs were and how much money came through the LDCF, because that's when we start to see the gaps. Yes, you can add the macro level information in the manual assessment report to additional information, but it's that very fine level of detail that we require as the COP and the CMA parties to do the determination of resources needed as mandated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. I can see you guys are really missing the negotiations a lot. Now I see Ismail raising his hand again. Colleagues, I don't want us to get into debate around the mandates, and I don't think that was the purpose of the webinar. So I think hold you guys powder dry for the negotiations once they start. There was a question by, I'm just seeing you in the chat, Lamrani Hamu. You had something about a question about learning gathered from the Arab region. Maybe you want to raise that? Please go ahead. Lamrani Hamu, please go ahead. Can't seem to hear him. Pedrick Oliver, we'll come back to Lamrani. Pedrick?
Sorry, I think I raised my hand by mistake.
Okay. Lamrani? Don't hear anything. Ismo?
Thanks, and sorry to take the floor again for the second time. Yeah, I don't think this is the time to enter to any negotiations, but I think that We need to keep an open mind on the needs. We need to recognize the needs are broad and we have different methodologies to determine those needs. And the mandate from Katowice is very clear in defining the framework of the intervention. So I leave it there, but surely the SCF will have vivid discussions in the months to come on the topic. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ismo. Lamrani was struggling to unmute himself. I'm not sure if he's back. Lamrani, do we have you back? Otherwise, I will just read what you put in the chat. I don't think we have him back. If I can read here in the chat, the question here, or what's been posted here is there room for the learning we gathered in the Arab region with ESQA, UNFCCC, and League of Arab States? What kind of cross-regional mechanism process for mutual learning and exchange? Some of the challenges highlighted in the report are common, others are specific. Could a sub-regional approach be a first step? George or any one of the team, if you want to venture in maybe responding to Lamrani there.
I can try to address the first question on cross-regional processes or learning. Some of the things we have identified as opportunities moving forward is the several platforms that have been set up, mostly by the UN bodies and the multilateral development banks that do offer chances or opportunities for cross-learning or for regional exchange of ideas and opportunities. Such platforms would include the CBIT platform. I think there is also the NDC platform that is organized by, for the African region, there is the AFDB, I think IFAD and several other partners, UNDP that are part of that, the NDC platform. So there are several regional platforms that have been provided for cross-learning between regions and between countries.
Thank you very much, George. Any other inputs from the team?
Thank you, Sahir. Probably just to add that the report also includes some regional information, so to precisely provide a little bit more inputs about the status of the regional approaches. So I think when the report is done, then you will be able to have this full perspective, but definitely this input is very important. So we will highlight more the regional approach.
Thank you very much, Sundram. I don't see anybody else asking for the floor. Matthias, do you want to make some comments before I just ask the team for some closing remarks, if there's no other? Matthias?
Thanks, Sahir, and thanks to participating and highlighting a couple of issues, which at least from my part found useful to hear. I mean, just a couple of thoughts from my side. I mean, I think for us, good to hear about the work of within the context of the African Development Bank, and maybe we could sort of do a joint comparing of notes to see how that work is going in relation to the work that we're doing here. And also, I mean, as a also reflection on Kamal's point on other types of national reports, which would be sort of outside the context of those mandated by, or those sort of within the context of the UNFCCC. I mean, I think that maybe speaks to sort of having some kind of context of other kinds of reports which are out there, which might not be included in the NDR itself, but sort of how they relate to each other. So thanks for that input as well. I mean, I guess one thing we'll have to look into is how many reports we will be able to go through, and I think the team has done a fantastic job going all through these thousands of reports and sifting through them to see what kind of material is out there. And there's also all the regional and global reports left, which we'll be looking into. So there's quite a lot of material to go through and to be able to present that in a fashion which makes it readable and understandable and makes it possible for us to make some takeaways from that. But I think more also as a general note has been highlighted. I mean, the call for evidence is still open. So we're looking forward to have your insights into what more we need to, or we should be looking into and taking into consideration when elaborating the report. And of course, if there is also other, feel free also to reach out to Secretariat colleagues to make sure that we're sort of including as much as possible what's already out there, so we get as comprehensive report as possible. Thanks, here.
Thank you very much, Matthias. There was a question about the availability of the report. At this stage, it's still in a drafting process and it will be discussed with the SCF, etc. So the report in itself is not available as yet, but the Secretariat intends releasing the report or concluding the work on this report in this year. So the report would be available later this year in 2020. Obviously, this report will be going then to the COP26 process next year. Any last remarks from the team that you may want to add or say? Floor is open for the team.
Hi, Zahir. This is Athena.
Please go ahead, Athena.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for participating, and thank you, co-chairs. Just as Matthias said, just to remind everybody that the call for evidence is still open, and it's actually extended until the end of October, so October 30, 2020. We would really welcome further submissions, particularly, as one of the participants said earlier, case studies. We would like to hear as many examples from countries about what you are learning, particularly as this is the first needs determination report on what you're learning from your own country processes, what are the emerging opportunities there, and especially activities and plans that are coming out that is also yielding a lot of the financial information at that local and national level. So I would just reiterate our desire to hear more from countries on that note. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Athena. Any of the other members? I see a hand there, Faiz Yusuf. Did you want to intervene? Faiz Yusuf? Maybe if you could put your question in the chat. I see there's also another hand from Frank. Frank? Secretariat, is there any message coming from them?
Hi, Zahir. No, we don't have any messages coming from the participants at this point in time. Participants wishing to speak, they need to unmute themselves. If they cannot do it, then they should reconnect.
Okay. Because I saw some hands, but nobody speaking, so maybe they are muted. If they can send them, because I want to wrap up, so I'm not sure whether we should wait. It might take too long to reconnect and come back in again. Secretariat, did you want to just clarify in terms of when the report will be finally available? I may have said the wrong thing there.
Thanks, Zahir. So the report is expected to be completed sometime early next year. The Standing Committee will meet at the end of the month to take stock of the work that has been done so far, but also to look at the timelines, indicative timelines for this. more information will be available after the SCF meeting at the end of this month with respect to timelines as well. Back to you, Zahir.
Thanks, Mary-Glenn. Is Faiz reconnected again? Doesn't seem to be unmuted. Okay, then before, just in the way of wrapping up, I'd like to thank all the participants for engaging in this very lively and helpful discussion. We've heard quite a bit of interesting perspectives, and we intend to take them all into consideration as we move forward with the development of the report. Once again, I want to encourage you to continue to remain engaged with us on the report as the report being finalized in the months ahead. And once again, if you do have information or data or any advice that you believe might be contribute to the work of the report, there is the call for proposals. Submit your inputs under this official call for evidence, and this should be done before the 30th of October. The information should be sent to the Secretariat, and the address is available on the Secretariat's on the UNFCCC's webpage. This will obviously, for people to note that this report will also, because it's still the first draft of it, will be discussed by the Standing Committee on Finance, which will be having its virtual meeting around the 28th and to 30th of September. There will be further discussions on this report, and further guidance will be given to us in the evolution of this report. Before I close the meeting, I'll just hand over to Matthias for any last closing remarks. Matthias?
Nothing further from me, just to thank participants for joining us and looking forward to working with you all on completing the report. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matthias. And then therefore, on that note, I'd like to thank all the participants in this webinar. Thank you very much for your active participation. Thank you very much for your support. Secretariat, thank you very much for your assistance and support during this webinar. And please feel free to communicate to the Secretariat, respond to the call for proposal, evidence, etc. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody and have a good evening or good morning or good afternoon to you wherever you are. And please continue to stay safe. Thank you very much and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you very much. Tahir. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone.